Imagine stepping into the heart of ancient Rome, a place where it's not the smell of fresh bread that fills the air, but the cries of sellers and the sobs of human beings, the slave market, a place where people were not known by their names, but by their price. From the 3rd century BC, right after the Punic Wars with Carthage, a massive wave of war captives flooded these markets. Roman soldiers would conquer lands, chaining women, men, and even children, and bringing them straight to Rome. In the Forum Venalium, the most famous slave market, a horrifying scene unfolded. Slaves were made to stand on wooden platforms, with a small plaque hung around their necks. On it were written their age, origin, skills, and even illnesses. Then, prices were shouted out loud for all to hear. Ordinary citizens lined up for cheap slaves, farm workers, or simple servants. But the aristocrats had their eyes on young women and strong men. They were willing to pay thousands of sesterces because these people were not just slaves to them, but symbols of power and luxury. Picture this: a young woman from the eastern lands with black hair and terrified eyes, standing on the platform. No one understands her language. In the eyes of the crowd, she is not a human being, but a commodity. The hammer of the auctioneer strikes the table, marking the end of her free life. This was the hidden face of Rome's power, an empire built on the backs of millions of slaves. If you want to know what happened to these women and men, and what the real price of a human being was in ancient Rome, don't miss the next episode. And please, subscribe to the channel and like this video, so this story can reach even more people. The fate of enslaved women in Rome was as varied as it was tragic. Some were purchased as domestic servants, spending their days cleaning villas, preparing meals, and tending to children. Others were sent to the fields, working long hours under the burning sun, side by side with male slaves, often treated with even less regard because of their gender. Yet for many young women, the most common fate was to become part of their master's household in a far darker way. Wealthy Romans often sought them out for companionship or exploitation. They had no right to refuse, and no voice in the choices made for their bodies or their lives. In some cases, beautiful and skilled women were trained to become entertainers, singers, dancers, or even courtesans, forced to perform at feasts to amuse Roman elites. A select few might catch the eye of a powerful patron and rise in status, even gaining a degree of comfort or influence. But this was rare, and always dependent on the whims of their owner. For the vast majority, life was marked by fear and uncertainty. They could be beaten for the smallest mistake, sold to another master without warning, or separated forever from their children. A woman who bore a child remained enslaved, and her child was also born a slave, belonging not to her, but to the master. This cycle of despair created generations of enslaved families where freedom was almost impossible to imagine. For Roman society, women were not just prisoners of their sex, but prisoners of the empire's insatiable hunger for power, labor, and control. In Rome, slaves were not only human beings, but also commodities with a specific economic value. Their price varied depending on age, gender, skills, and physical health. A young and strong man with experience in farming or construction usually had a higher value than an older or sick man. Young and beautiful women, especially those who could cook or take care of children, were priced higher. Skilled slaves, such as carpenters, blacksmiths, or private tutors, were the most expensive category. Even animals were bought and sold in Roman markets. But slaves were considered far more valuable by their owners because they could perform complex tasks and generate greater economic output. The trade of slaves was similar to the buying and selling of any other goods. Before paying, the buyer would inspect the slave, assess their abilities and health, and then determine the price. In crowded markets, some slaves were auctioned, and their price fluctuated depending on the number of buyers and the reputation of their skills. However, no amount of money could compensate for their human worth. Slaves remain beings without the right to choose their lives. With all their property and freedom under someone else's control. Despite the limitations and hardships of life, many slaves in Rome did not sit idly by. They tried in various ways to gain at least small freedoms or to improve their living conditions. Some secretly communicated with each other, exchanged information and news from the outside, and sometimes even planned escapes. Some skilled slaves, because of their abilities, had higher economic value and could obtain limited freedom in exchange for loyalty or special services. Nevertheless, danger was always present, and any wrong move could lead to severe punishment. Yet these small efforts and covert acts of resistance showed that the human spirit is never completely defeated. Even in the darkest conditions, slaves maintained hope for freedom and a better life in their hearts. And in the end, we thank you for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and follow our historical stories. Every day, we prepare a new and fascinating video about history so we can travel to the past together.